Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This video is a summary of a paper written by Abdelhamid Brahimi, and the topic of the paper is an Islamic view of socialism. And this also is a chapter from the book called An Encyclopedia of Islamic Economics. So in this chapter, we're going to look at some of the core ideas of socialism and the Islamic perspective on it. So first of all, the author talks about the background of socialism. So he says that socialism appeared in the years after 1820 following the Industrial Revolution, and it was a reaction against the capitalist system. So the first point to note is that the birth of socialism is a sort of a reaction to the injustices of the capitalist system. The various socialist movements focused on the injustice, inequality, and suffering caused by the capitalist means of production and the market forces. The majority of writers within the socialist movement favored a new type of society based on the public ownership of the means of production and an equitable distribution of income. So what was the goal or the end objective of the socialist movements? It was the dictatorship of the proletariat, or the public ownership of the means of production. So one of the primary critiques of capitalism was that the means of production, the machines, the factories, they were owned by a small elite group of people, and that small capitalist class was taking the bulk of the value of the production. So that those means of production, those factories and machines and equipment need to be spread around, and their ownership needs to be distributed across the society, and that's what is meant by the public ownership of the means of production. And then the author talks about some of the historical background of socialism, which we're not going into detail. Let's look at the next main point, which is the vision and the means of achieving the goals. So the socialists share the same vision. The vision is to create a new society where producers would have control of the means of production, as we discussed already, and they would also take away the political power from the hands of the capitalists. So this is famously called as the dictatorship of the proletariat, i.e. the working class starts ruling. So it's no longer a small group of capitalists who control the means of production as well as political power, but of course that has to be taken away from that capitalist class. The next the author says is that the various socialist thinkers, they differed over the ways and means to be used to achieve the final goal. So there were disagreements between the socialist philosophers on how to achieve the end goal. So let's now move on to the discussion. So the author discusses and critiques each point as follows. So first he starts with the philosophical bases of Marxism, and then he provides the Islamic perspective on it. So the first core idea underlying Marxism or socialism is the idea of historical materialism. And the author says that it is the scientific aspect of Marxism, which is based on a rejection of religion. And historical materialism looks at how society develops. It focuses on how people work together to produce things. So not every individual can produce everything, so people have to come together. But the way the people come together, that shapes the relations in the society, and that shapes the entire society. So these work relationships affect everything, including law, including politics, and even how people think. Next, the author brings a quote from Karl Marx, whereby he says that imagine a society is like a building, and the building has a foundation and the superstructure on top of the foundation. So he says that in the social production of their existence, men inevitably enter into definite relations, i.e., people must work together to survive and live. So this is inevitable. We need to work together to be able to produce and survive. So that's a necessity. Now, then he says men enter into relations of production appropriate to a given stage in the development of material forces of production. Now, the technology determines these relationships of production. So the way we produce, that shapes the relationships. So, for example, in during the Industrial Revolution, we shifted from a feudal mode of production to an industrial or factory mode of production. So, so factories were being used for mass production, and machines were being used, and machine and labor were being brought together. So the use of machines and the use of factories gave rise to certain relationships between the owning class who owned the factories and the working class, the laborers. So the technology influences the relationships of production. So according to Marx, these relationships of production are the foundation of the society. So this is the economic system. The totality of these relations constitute the economic structure of the society. So this is the foundation, this is the economic structure, the real foundation. And on top of this foundation, on top of these relations of production, on top of that, the legal and political superstructure is built. So that's what Marx is saying here, that the foundation, the base of the society is the economic relationships of the people with each other with regard to the production. So how we make money, who works for whom, who owns what, how the wealth is distributed. So those questions about the production and distribution, those questions affect how laws are made and how politics and society works. So the way the history progresses, or the way change occurs, is when the foundation changes, when the technology changes, then the relations of production also change, and accordingly the building changes too. So the foundation is the key, and the laws and the politics and social norms, those change with the change of the economic system or the economic structure. Now, in the last paragraph of this, the author goes on to critique the idea of historical materialism. So, as we mentioned, that according to this idea, the evolution of human societies, history is explained through the change in economic factors, through the changes in the relations of production, and other factors such as religion and human impulse. They don't play a central role. The author believes that this theory, first of all, needs more historical proof, and also this is too a simplistic explanation because a society is too complex. So just using economic explanation to explain history and the evolution of societies is reductive and insufficient. So next, the author talks about the social dimension, and he brings a quote which says, The history of all previous societies is the history of the class struggle. So according to Marx, the relations of production produce different classes in the society. So let's take the example of the modern factory production. So the factory production, which is the technology, leads to two classes of people. So there is a working class, the laborers, and then the factory owners, the capitalist class. So the technology has led to two relations of production, right? And two different classes in a society. Now, in a society characterized by pure competition, men who are theoretically equal are in fact separated, or people become unequal because of the unequal distribution of wealth and the unequal distribution of power. Now, the solution proposed by Marx is that a revolution by the working class, the proletariat, would end these social contradictions. So these class struggles, or the development of two classes, the working class and the capitalist class, this leads to social contradictions and tensions in the society, and these tensions are caused by the unequal distribution of wealth and power. So a revolution by the working class would end these social contradictions and also lead to the end of the unfair distribution. However, of course, what happened in reality is otherwise. So the author says, on real grounds, the socialist revolutions of the proletariat caused more miseries than the capitalist concentration of property and wealth did. On the other hand, capitalist societies accomplished the methodological improvement of the standard of living of the working class that actually reduced economic and social inequality and removed any desire to revolt among laborers. So here the author is saying that the predictions of Marx did not come true. The socialist revolution did not lead to the utopia which was expected. However, there was a lot of misery in the socialist revolutions. And on the other hand, the capitalist societies, especially after the Great Depression, the welfare state capitalism led to the improvement in the standard of living of the people. So, and also the desire to revolt among the laborers was gone. So they did not revolt as predicted. So the author then moves on to discuss some of the other important points related to the Marxist theory, and a fundamental point is the labor theory of value, according to which labor alone is productive. So according to this idea, the capitalists exploit the workers, they appropriate part of the value the workers produce, and they sell in the market to finance their own consumption. So basically, what Marx is saying is the value, the wage which the workers get is less than the actual value they contribute. So let's say if they're contributing $100, they're only getting paid $50 as wage, and the remaining $50 is the profit which the capitalist is making. This is what Marx called as the surplus value. So the 50 the workers were deserving $100 as compensation. However, they are only getting 50. The remaining 50 is the exploitation, is the surplus value which the capitalists are getting out of the workers. So this is the idea of the labor value and the surplus value. So the author critiques the Marxist theory of value, saying that this theory is only considering labor as a source of value, and it ignores other value sources such as property contribution, capital investment, and so on. And he says it doesn't. This theory of Marx does not recognize the contribution of things and properties to creating value. This is an obvious fact of life, it requires that the owner of capital should make a fair return of owned properties. So he's saying that in reality, labor alone is not producing everything. So there are other mm, factors of production beside labor also, which contribute to the production process, and they should be rewarded accordingly. Not the entire value or the entire product does not belong to the labor. Rather, there are other factors of production which also deserve compensation. The next point which the author brings is that the exchange value is not determined exclusively by the labor, and indeed in the formation of the exchange value we cannot overlook four additional elements, i.e. the entrepreneur, the machines, the natural resources, and the consumer demand and social preferences. So the price is determined um, by various factors, including the entrepreneur, the machines input, the natural resources, and the consumer demand. So the exchange value is not just determined based on the labor value, because you could spend 1 hour of labor with a machine and produce 10 units, and then you can spend 1 hour of labor with a better quality machine and produce 100 units. So while the labor has remained the same, but the quality of the machine has increased the production from 10 to 100. So you can't say that the 1 hour of labor has produced 90 additional units. In fact, the machine has helped to increase the production from 10 to 100. So you can't just say that labor is the only source of value. The author then brings another point of critique from Baqir al-Sadr's book called Iqtisaduna. And from that he says, Marx's exclusion of craft industries, arts, literature and services, whose contribution to the GDP is significant, from the scope of the law of value is not justified. The products of craft industries, the arts, books are widely exchanged in the market at specific prices without reference to the amount of labor involved in their production. So what he's saying is these things sell for prices that don't match the work hours put in. So a painting might take, for example, 10 hours to paint or to make, but it may sell for millions of dollars. Similarly, a book might take a year to write, but may only sell for $10 or $20. Similarly, a consultation might take 1 hour, but may cost thousands of dollars. So this shows that the theory is simple, and value is not just about the labor time. And the author then goes to give a few more examples of to demonstrate that the labor is not the only source of value. There are other sources of value. So if you're interested, you can just read these paragraphs. Again, the idea is that value is not just labor. There are other natural resources, machinery, entrepreneurial skills, and so on, which are also important part of the production process. So the last point is the issue of the concentration of capital. So what the capitalists do is they chase profits, and they want to maximize the surplus value they can gain from the workers by using more and more machines at the expense of workers. So they want to hire more machines and hire fewer workers. So they want to increase the proportion of the capital vis-a-vis the labor. So they want to invest more capital and control more production. And this leads to the concentration of the means of production and to their centralization in the hands of a few capitalists. So the wealth concentrates in a few hands. And along with that, what happens is bigger companies emerge, smaller businesses disappear, and then there is also the creation of monopolies, since the wealth is concentrated in a few hands. So there is the development of monopolies and oligopolies. And since the laborers are being replaced by machines, the workers become poorer and poorer over time. Now, what happens is the limitations of the domestic market with regard to capital, equipment, as well as consumer goods leads the capitalist countries to seek overseas markets. So this is the issue of overproduction. So once a lot of machines and factories and equipment are used to produce, there is overproduction which cannot be consumed domestically. So these capitalist countries try to export the overproduced goods to other countries, and this leads to colonial wars to conquer underdeveloped countries. However, according to the view, Marxist view, capitalism will eventually be shaken by cyclical crises, the class struggle, and the progressive decline of the rate of profit, which will lead to the disappearance or the end of capitalism. So this is the thesis, and again, now the author will shed some light on his own perspective. Now he says that we know from experience that capital goods used in a given project play an integral part in determining the prices of finished goods and the profit generated in any economic activity. So he's saying that so capital or machines are a factor of production. So he's again critiquing the labor theory of value. It's not just labor which creates value. The machines also play a role in the value, and if goods are produced by machines, then that determines the price of the finished goods and the profit. Also, he's saying that the role of the entrepreneur is very important. So you cannot say that the surplus value is being extracted from labor. He's saying that the entrepreneur has leadership qualities, organizational qualities, and for that, entrepreneurs deserve a share of the pie, share of the revenues. It's not just the laborers. And he gives an example. He says comparative studies undertaken in the United States and Europe during the 1960s showed that similar projects involving the same amount of capital and workforce produced very different levels of production, productivity, and profit depending on the effectiveness and organizational skills. So entrepreneurial skills are very important. Next, the author says Marx's prophecy that workers becoming poorer and capitalists becoming richer would lead to the overthrow of the bourgeois regime and the disappearance of capitalism has not come true. So, this prophecy that the workers will rise and overthrow the system, this did not come true. On the contrary, workers' living conditions have improved over time in capitalist countries, and capitalism has not disappeared after more than 2 centuries of existence. So the idea that the class struggles and the contradictions will lead to the disappearance and end of capitalism has not happened. In fact, capitalism has been reinforced with increased globalization following the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of socialism in the Soviet Union. So capitalism has not disappeared as predicted by Marx. And finally, another point is that history teaches us that although economic factors play an important role in colonial wars, it was not the fall of the rate of profit in capitalist society that drove colonialism. Actually, colonialism predates capitalism. Colonialism existed even before capitalism, going as far back as the colonial conquests by the Greeks and the Romans in order to control the eastern and the southern shores of the Mediterranean in the 6th century BC. So the author is giving the example of the Greeks and the Romans who were colonizing countries much before capitalism. So to say that colonialism is explained by capitalism because the capitalists want to sell their excess production in other countries and they are in search for new markets. That explanation is not sufficient since even in the absence of capitalism, colonialism has existed historically. Okay, I think that's pretty much the theoretical content of this paper. The author then makes some analysis of the countries which have adopted socialism, and he explains the case of China and Venezuela and what happened in those countries. However, for our purposes, we are only interested in the theory and the foundational principles of socialism. Um, so, if you're interested, you can read the paper and assess the practical implications of the socialist policies in the USSR and Eastern Europe and other countries. In China, Yugoslavia, and socialism in the rest of the world, in Latin America, in Cuba. Okay, thank you very much. If you have any questions and comments, please let me know.